Hello, welcome to the weekly news roundup for Osint Bunker. I know we are off on the podcast this week, and some slightly big stuff has happened. Even after I announced the fact that I would be doing a weekly news update, because I knew if we took a week off, of course, the entire world would decide to blow up. Namely the Middle East this week. So let's get right into it. To start off, I wanted to talk about vaccination efforts, especially China's influence on some third world countries and additionally other countries in their increasing sphere of influence, especially in Africa and Asia. China has been shipping a large number of vaccines to countries like Thailand, Tanzania, and several other African countries. And this is definitely causing those countries to look more towards China for assistance, both economically and, of course, in situations like this where China is willing to give out vaccines. This is just an example of the way soft power can be used to influence countries and sort of bring them even further into China's sphere of influence that is growing in the region. Now, if we get down to the numbers, China is shipping over 1 million doses of the vaccine a week to Africa. They've sent over 7 million doses to Turkey. India is setting up a vaccine friendship program with other countries in the region. And Russia is shipping out vaccines basically to anyone. These are all countries that have a fairly robust vaccine production apparatus where they are able to produce a large number of vaccines, some of which may not be as well internationally certified or as effective, but providing a vaccine with 70% effectiveness with less clinical testing is still better for a lot of these countries' leadership than getting no vaccine at all, which is what's being offered by countries like the US and the UK. As a bookend to this, the US and other countries have started to put together better funding, like the COVAX vaccine facility, which is responsible for pooling resources for vaccine distribution. A lot of countries have pledged a large amount of money, but it hasn't actually shipped out vaccines yet. So we're seeing China, of course, take an early lead in practically shipping out vaccines. In our first bit of Middle Eastern news, sources inside the Israeli government say that Iran was responsible for the attack on the Israeli car carrier MV Helios Ray. This is going to be definitely interesting because if the Israeli government is willing to prove a direct connection from Iran to the attack, it would definitely sway a lot of international opinion, particularly from the US, and definitely would change the situation a lot and cause some evolution, certainly, in the position of, at least I believe, the Biden administration. We'll talk about this a lot next week on the podcast, just to get down and get a bit more information. In our next bit of Middle Eastern news, on February 27th, there were a large number of suicide drones launched by the Houthi rebels at southern Saudi Arabia. Most seem to have been intercepted by the Saudi Air Defense Network, which has been fairly competent in taking down these drones. We're going to see over the next few days how the Saudis respond to these drone attacks. I particularly, and I believe some other people, expect most likely Saudi airstrikes on Houthi targets that they believe were responsible for the drone attacks. As you can see, the region targeted was in southern Saudi Arabia. These cities aren't exactly unknown to be targeted by Houthi-launched suicide drones and ballistic missiles, so it's not exactly unexpected or surprising, but we'll definitely see how the Saudis decide to respond to it. Now, this is an interesting one. It seems that the Iraqi Ministry of Defense has actually denied cooperating or exchanging information with the U.S. on our strikes in Syria last week. Now, that's somewhat expected because the Iraqi government is trying to walk a fine line right now between cooperating extensively with Iran and dealing with the very large number of Iranian militias inside Iraq and also cooperating with the US, which holds a lot of power as well in the region. So I believe if I can make an assessment of this, that they did cooperate with the U.S. government, but they did not expect the U.S. government to announce that they had cooperated with them. It just puts the Iraqi government in sort of a difficult situation where they are sort of forced to take a side and they can't politically. Now, our last piece of news out of the Middle East is going to be, of course, the U.S. airstrikes in Syria on Hezbollah targets and Iranian backed militias. It seems that there were a couple of specific militias targeted in the border town of Al Bakamal. Of course, I butcher every pronunciation of Middle Eastern names, which is probably going to kill me at some point. But the U.S. airstrikes were definitely a retaliation against the attack on Erbil Airport. And the group that was targeted, which I'm not going to attempt the name, but it's on the screen, of course, is basically a Hezbollah group. And they are involved in Iraqi politics heavily. And are backed very concretely by the Iranians. So we definitely know that the U.S. attempted to strike back at these groups. And it's going to be certainly interesting to see how they respond, both Iran and the militias. We'll definitely talk about this next week in the podcast, but the militias definitely feel targeted here, just like they did a bit over a year ago when the U.S. was striking militia targets before the killing of Qasem Soleimani. So we'll see how that evolves and how the militias decide to respond to it. And for our last piece of news for this weekend, there was a very large U.S. combined joint operation observing the Russian Kaliningrad area involving U.S. P-8 Poseidons, RC-135s. I believe there was an RQ-4B Global Hawk, RAF RC-135W, an E-8 Joint Stars, and then we also saw a bunch of tanker support coming over to help them out, and a few U.S. Army RC-12X guardrails. So that would be RAF, U.S. Air Force, U.S. Army, and U.S. Navy all participating in this sort of massive joint observation point of the important Russian enclave in Europe of Kaliningrad. So obviously, I'm sure the Russians had some feelings about that, and they will definitely. I don't think they'll respond in any kind at this point, just because it was more observation based. But we might see maybe some shenanigans in the Black Sea. They might intercept another U.S. observation aircraft, sort of as a response. But I don't expect anything else to come out of it. But it definitely reflects at least the Biden administration's new harder stance on Russia without openly announcing it. So we'll see how that evolves into the future. Thank you so much for watching. If there is a big event this week, we have decided that depending on who is available from the podcast, we may host a live stream on the channel, sort of as a live update to anything that's going on. And we will definitely tweet that out if we do that. Thank you so much, and I will see everyone back here next week.